All right, this morning has kind of coming together. We had a great chat with Chris Trotter earlier. I want to recommend to you, and with their permission, we will publish it on the platform too, the New Zealand Centre for Political Research, March 14th. It published, that's only 3 days ago, it was last Friday, a piece by Dr. Muriel Newman. And I like the headline, National has a problem. They don't seem to know why they were elected, and it is bizarre. And that got me, that hooked me to the whole article. And I agreed with much of what Muriel said, so I asked her on the program this morning to talk us through it and hopefully encourage you to have a read of this piece. So Muriel Newman joins us on the phone now. How are you, Muriel? You there? Hello?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. Hello. We've got you loud and clear. That's good.
Thank you.
Muriel, okay, let's just start. And I really liked, and it's headlined Eliminating Woke. There's so much to like about this article that you've written. Why do you think National were elected?
I think that, there was a lot of stuff going on, right? The economy was failing, inflation was running out of control, public services were bad. So all of that, you put that on one side, and that was really top of mind for a lot of voters. But there was this other concern, and it was this invasion, if you like, of New Zealand by identity politics, which is the agenda that Jacinda Ardern activated and poured a lot of money into it. She empowered it, and it was starting to impact on everyday Kiwis, from all this Maori language stuff that was being pushed on us to, the transgender infiltration that was going on. It was everywhere, and people wanted to be protected from that. And that's the problem that National has. They're trying really hard on the other stuff, and they're making progress. But on this stuff, they've basically turned a blind eye.
But they would argue, I'm sure, Muriel, they never campaigned on the anti-woke stuff. That was just projected on to them because they weren't Labour. And actually we've found that amongst them, there's a fair dollop of woke.
Yeah. I think if you break that down, first of all, they did campaign on a number of the key woke policies, right? Their whole stand on stopping three waters, stopping co-governance, that's all a part of that agenda. Winston Peters had some specific things as well that he put into the coalition, as did David Seymour. And so they are doing those. They're picking them off bit by bit. But what they're failing to do is to realise that a lot of the stuff that was put in place by the Ardern Labour government is rolling out now across the private sector.
Give us some examples of that. Give us some examples of that.
Okay. When Labour was in power, they changed the Incorporated Societies Act, which means that by 2026, by next year, 24,000 private sector organisations have got to have a new constitution. And what's been happening is that they're being infiltrated by woke activists. So you've got organisations like Internet New Zealand now talking about having a co-governance board, Maori and non-Maori. You've got the Pharmacy Council now doing cultural competency training of their
Real
staff.
Estate Institute, Auckland University. Yeah, okay, I get you. And,
audiologists.
And, yeah.
And so up and down the country, all these, professional people, salespeople, whatever, they are now being told they have to swear allegiance to the treaty. They've got to promote the partnership agenda of Maori sovereignty activists. And they're saying, why the hell is this happening? Who's protecting us from this?
Because Labour set a time bomb of woke,
exactly.
For a woke explosion. That's why.
Exactly. Yeah. And they put it through, it was one of these slow burning reactions, right? These policies. And now it's coming to pass. It's a bit like, the whole funding of the media, the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Now, that made a big splash when we all realised what was going on, but what most people don't know is it carries on until next year, for God's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Muriel, this could all stop. And half the problem is that I think there are a whole lot of people who may not buy into the woke stuff, but they've all been told they have to do it for a while now. And without being mean to them individually, they're people who tend to be bureaucratic and everything, saying, well, I better do that or I might get in trouble. They're people well motivated by fear and mediocrity. They just need to be told to stop doing it. It's like we need the Prime Minister to stand up like Donald Trump has in the States and said, here are some things on some issues. And we're not going to do it like that anymore. Even if he can't sign an executive order, it's like we need a leadership moment.
Yeah, and that's the point that we make in the article, that it's not good enough for National to turn a blind eye to all of this. Now, I think the coalition partners are quite worried about it all because they can see what it's doing to their supporters. They're getting very, very anxious about it. But National, of course, has got its hands full of, so-called bigger issues, but they cannot ignore this. And so we do need a leadership moment from Christopher Luxon, because if he doesn't do this, this could be very bad for him. Like, we already have a lot of people now talking about, is he the right guy for the job? It's this that's driving that feeling about him. And he needs to acknowledge it and do something about it. And you're right, he can't do executive orders, but he certainly can stand up and show leadership. Now, what's happened, of course, is that we've seen in America, Donald Trump did sign an executive order to get rid of diversity, equity and inclusion programs in the federal government and the private sector that contracts to the federal government. And what's happening there is that all this racism stuff, the gender stuff, it's all disappearing. If you see what's happening in the private sector, all these companies that adopted these policies and, quotas instead of hiring on merit, they're all getting rid of them. And so it's going all the way through their society. And what we've seen here in New Zealand is Winston Peters has now come up and suggested they've got a private members bill that they're putting into the ballot, which goes along the same lines of what Donald Trump's been doing in the US. And we need the Prime Minister to say,
you must have been encouraged then that Luxon said, look, I might get on board with that. It wasn't a commitment,
exactly.
But it was, I might get on board with that. I think part of the problem we've got here, Muriel, is that his advisors are largely young people.
Yeah.
Who have grown up in this, and I look and think, maybe that's why I didn't get an interview. It's got nothing to do with him. He's just got a bunch of woke kids running his office.
The problem is, Sean, that, if you don't understand what the agenda is all about and where it's heading, then you can brush it off, right? You can think, just ignore all that. But the problem is,
he said to me, I'll tell you what, Luxon has said to me specifically, why don't I interview you? Oh, because you always go on about gender issues or transvestites or something. Yeah, well, because it's an important story. It's actually the cultural sort of, that's the cultural war of our time. But he was basically telling me I'm going to interview because I don't know anything about those things and I don't want to get into it.
Yeah, well, he needs to up his game on all this because it's not going to go away. You just think of the numbers I said, 24,000 private sector organisations are all wrestling this now.